I'm well, Cedric. Thank you so much for hosting today. It's fantastic to be able to still do this, even if Mark is away. So this is great. Yeah, we're trying to get some more fantastic immigration information out there, and this is a great way to be able to do that. So we are welcoming people back to the live Q&A session, and hopefully people can start logging in and saying hello and letting us know where you're listening from, and we can do some shout outs logging here. In and saying hello. Yeah, we were great. We're able to see some more people filtering in here, so that's fantastic. We've got a hello, and I'm not sure where Gilbert's listening in from, but hello to you. Uh-oh. Are people able to hear me? Let us know if you can hear Cedric and if you can hear me. Hi, Igor. All right, well, we'll maybe work on some microphone issues here in the background. We'll try to I can hear Cedric, so it's interesting. We'll try to figure out what's going on there. Maybe it says, all right, somebody's saying Grace is saying Cedric is muted, so
All
there
right,
might be a
how is
difference in
this?
terms
I
of
think I fixed it. We have more comments. Alicia, your audio is good. I Alicia, yes. No, Cedric. How is it now? Can you hear me now? I think I fixed it. I changed the setting. I was using a wrong microphone. Please just let us know if you can hear me.
hopefully, yeah, I'll actually ask the question if
Let us
nobody
know if you
can
can
hear
hear me.
Cedric.
All right.
He's changed his settings, so let us know if you can hear Cedric now. Perfect.
Hi guys, sorry about that. I was saying how we're going to do a 4-hour French Q&A actually. So buckle in. I'm totally kidding. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for confirming that you can hear me. I really appreciate it, and thanks for your patience. Yeah, as I was mentioning actually, this is my we're starting to do our own Q&As without Mark, and this is part of the experiment. And we're so excited to have you here to answer some Q&As on immigration going forward. All right, Alicia, we were
Perfect.
talking. You said you wanted to give people an update on express entry and rounds of invitation. Should we chat about this a little?
Absolutely. So this is the big news is that ever since September 2021, there has been this drought in invitations to apply, which has now been broken as of July 2022. So this is a good development in that things are starting to move forward again in the express entry world. And of course, if you've been following this, the first draw was a few weeks ago, so it was July 6th, where that first round of invitation actually occurred. It was a small round of invitation. And yeah, if you look historically, there's only 1,500 people who were invited, and that CRS, so that comprehensive ranking score, was huge. It was at 557 CRS points, which is gigantic. For anybody who's got their profile in the express entry pool, you have to have some amazing English, French, and probably some work experience in Canada or possibly in employer offer of employment in order to meet that 557. So that was very high. it seems like immigration is staying with their prior practice of doing a draw about every 2 weeks. And so, indeed, we saw July 20th, so last week on Wednesday, there was another draw. The numbers were a little bit lower in terms of the required CRS cutoff and a little bit higher in terms of the number of invitations that were issued. So 1,750 invitations were issued. The CRS minimum points cutoff was 542, which is still super, super high, right? Most people, even if they're perfectly bilingual and they have some work experience in Canada, might not even meet that 542 requirement. So CRS score is still really high. We will wait to see what's happening. If immigration stays at the same frequency of draws, then the next round of invitations will probably be happening on August 3rd, so next Wednesday. So we're waiting to see what happens with that, and we're waiting to see how much that CRS score might come down a little bit. But Cedric, maybe if you want to take a kind of roll the screen over to the pool of applicants,
Hmm.
and we'll take a look at who's sitting in the pool of express entry applicants right now, what their CRS scores are. So, of course, this hasn't been updated since July 18th. So the people who were chosen in the July 20th draw will have been scooped out. But do take a look in here. We still have 9,101 people that are sitting between 501 to 600. So, of course, when that last draw was done, the 1,750 of them will be out, but there's still a large number of candidates. And unfortunately, between the 501 to 600 range, we don't have a detailed breakdown of those bandwidths. So it will be interesting to see what's going to happen. Hopefully, the next draw will be a little bit below 542, but we don't know. So we'll have to wait to see what happens next week.
Yeah, I've been speaking with some on the past live Q&As and saying that probably going to be over 500 for the next like 6 months
Yeah.
based on the past draws. Would you agree with that informed guess? Does that make sense?
I do think it's going to continue to stay very high. The only, I guess, interesting development that may completely change what's happening in terms of the ITAs is whether this draft legislation is going to get passed and how that will be implemented by the Minister of Immigration. And so, of course, if you guys have been listening and following what's happening in immigration legislative developments, there is potential legislation on the books that is not yet written into law that says that the Minister of Immigration will be able to choose certain economic objectives, and that's going to affect the invitations to apply. And we won't probably know what those are ahead of time. They'll probably be designated by the minister at the time that the ITA is announced, saying, I'm going to be choosing an economic objective that will foster French speakers outside of the province of Quebec, for example. And so maybe people who have high TEF or TCF scores will be able to be prioritized in that draw. Or maybe the immigration minister will say something like the economic objective is for a certain NOC code, or maybe it will be a certain type of work experience. So that can significantly change how these draws will happen because, of course, you won't only have that CRS score, there may be some sort of wild card thrown into the mix.
Yeah, and I think this is part why we encourage clients that if you have a decent CRS score, or just if you have a good profile for Express Entry, even if you're not in the 500s or 470s, to create a profile in the hopes that you're going to get an occupation specific or employer specific draw, which the CRS score is not going to be a factor. Would that make sense, Alicia? Would you recommend that as well?
Yep, for sure. In the past, and Mark and I have talked about this as well. In the past, if the CRS score was really, really low, then it might not have made sense to be able to put that profile up there. I mean, of course, if you're doing it on your own and you're not paying somebody for it, then maybe it's a free option. But if somebody's charging you a lot of money to help you with that express entry profile, in the past, it really was a matter of making sure that you were investing in something that was going to potentially have a benefit. Nowadays, it's much more of a I guess it's more difficult to predict what's going to happen with those CRS draws, because it's not only going to be points based, hopefully, or potentially, it will also be based on certain economic objectives, but we don't know what those economic objectives are ahead of time.
Yeah, so stay tuned to see what's going to happen. But CRS score over 500 for the next 6 months. Probably going to take a year or two to get back to pre-COVID levels of 480, 470, 460. But if you have a good profile, you're hoping to get that occupation-specific draw. So that's obviously something. Alicia, you have a lot of experience with express entry, eh? Do you?
I've been doing this for a few years now. So yes, an immigration lawyer for, oh gosh, I think almost 17 or 18 years, and then working with Express Entry and working with Mark for the last 2 years exclusively. And if you guys are interested, you can always take a look at our profiles. We are up on Holthe Immigration Law. We have a little bit about each of us on our bios. So Mark's there, I'm there, Cedric's there, Chanel is there, and you guys can read a little bit about our backgrounds and experience if you're interested in speaking with us further.
Yeah, so here we all are. We're Canadian immigration lawyers, so we provide legal advice to help individuals with all their immigration applications, strategies, supporting documents, forms, you name it. And I do want to just let you know that here I actually am based in Ottawa, but I do telework quite a bit. So right now for me it's 7:30 p.m. So if you're outside Canada and you want to speak to a lawyer on your time zone, not have to stay up late or whatnot. I'm here to talk. Or if you're in Canada, I actually have Alicia. I have a lot of clients where I think there's a problem with the booking, but they're speaking with me at 5 or 6 a.m. and on their time zone in Canada because they wake up and they're fresh and this is the first thing they want to do. So it's quite interesting, and they're also wondering like, wait, what's going on? Like, what do you mean you're talking to me at, at 5 a.m.? Like, what's going on? So, in any event, so if it seems to work for some people. I would have never thought. I'm not a morning person, so I would have never thought to wake up nice and early and speak with a lawyer. But obviously, with my time zone, it's possible. But here's Chanel's profile to book a consult, and once you click on here, you can see the various times that that Alicia has available. And so it's just the easy as booking a consult, and the various times are here. And same thing. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, if people are trying to figure out the time zone, it will normally default to your time zone when you log on and you're looking at the times that lawyers are available, but you can toggle that. You can change the
Right.
time zone as well. So if you're in a different time zone, or if for some reason you want to double check, then make sure you've selected the correct time zone for what area you are in.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to pull it up here. Trying to show everyone. Yeah, there we go. At the very bottom, you see time zone. There we go. And so here you can actually
Yeah,
put it on your time zone on where you are, and it
yeah,
does adjust accordingly at the various
yeah.
times. So please double check that. Excellent.
Perfect.
Well, there we go. Should we start taking some questions?
Absolutely. Let's see what people are wondering about today.
Fantastic. So let's take a look. Sorry, let's go back to this main screen. And this was a really interesting question. I'm not sure it applies to a lot of people, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, Alicia. Sorry, I'm just trying to get everything, all the right dimensions here going. The person asks, can a person be considered inadmissible to Canada for illegally entering the United States or previous deportation for status reasons? What are your thoughts on
Mhm.
this?
Yeah, and this is something that comes up very frequently because we have a number of clients, of course. Canada and the US share the one of the longest land borders anywhere. So we have a lot of clients who come from the US to Canada either as visitors, or they've received a work permit in Canada, and something has happened in their past in terms of what their status was in the US. And of course, every case is very specific. And if this is your circumstance, then I would always recommend that you do speak to one of us, particularly about your scenario, because we can only give general immigration information on this live stream. We can't give specific legal advice because we just don't know enough about your background and all the particulars, which makes a huge difference in what kind of advice we can give. However, generally, What happens is if there is some sort of deportation or charge in the US, and that is something that comes up on your record, your immigration criminal record search, then that is something that could potentially make you inadmissible to Canada. So, whenever an applicant is making a permanent resident application to Canada, you have to provide that FBI report. And sometimes, if there's something that shows up on the FBI report, you also have to provide a state report, a police report, or a record search. And if there is something on there that is coming up on your file, then that is something that Canadian immigration authorities are going to want to look into. So, something that is a charge in a foreign country or an offense, so something that has actually resulted in criminality, for sure is big bad news for Canadian immigration and can make you potentially inadmissible under the Immigration Refugee Protection Act and regulations. So that's something that's very important that you'll want to discuss with a lawyer. In terms of some types of irregular entries to the US, sometimes if there has never been a charge, if it's not a criminal offense or it's not equated to a Canadian criminal offense, then it's possible there might not be an inadmissibility. But this is a really technical area of law, and I would really urge people to book a consultation so we can discuss the particulars in detail.
Well, there we go. There we have it. Very detailed answer. But you're absolutely right. It's really case specific. It's hard to talk about these things in 3 lines. And we have here Fernando Cecilia who says, Karina, it will definitely hurt you, but it will not make you automatically inadmissible, but it will be hard to get an approval. Um, yeah, I mean, not automatically inadmissible as you talked about, but yeah, definitely not ideal. And the more specific information is definitely going to be needed.
And I think Fernando does have a good point. Some things could make you automatically inadmissible if you had a criminal charge that was outstanding, for example. But the thing that can make you inadmissible is, of course, and this is a big bad specter looming in the distance for all applicants, is misrepresentation. So if you do have something in your past that you have failed to disclose, if on any of your immigration applications, there's almost always a question that says, have you ever been charged, arrested, detained, or convicted of an offense in Canada or any other country? And a lot of people answer that incorrectly. Just because you had a charge that was dismissed, you still have to answer yes because it was a charge, even if it was later dismissed. If you had a criminal um, conviction that was overturned on appeal or that was later expunged, you still have to answer yes because it used to exist at one point. And so making sure to properly disclose any sort of potential charge, conviction, arrest, detention is absolutely essential. So do be very, very careful because even if you're maybe not inadmissible for whatever that charge used to be, you can be for sure inadmissible for 5 years with a 5-year bar for misrepresentation if you fail to tell the truth about it.
Yeah, and that's another interesting point too. I've had a few clients who say, you know what, I've been found inadmissible or I had a misrepresentation in Canada, but you know what, it's fine. I'm just gonna go to the UK and everything's gonna be fine, or come to the States. Canada does have information sharing agreements, and with a lot of countries, but this same information is actually sought also in those applications. So again, information sharing agreements, so they might actually have access to the Canadian immigration files, the applications that you have completed. But they're also going to ask you the same questions if you refuse the visa, you have a misrepresentation. So while you might think that okay, I'm inadmissible, I can't come to Canada, it's definitely something that you want to look into to see why are you inadmissible, why is there misrepresentation, and how can you advocate or how can you get this overturned, right? So it can get quite complicated pretty quickly. So we would recommend to reach out to us to book a consultation to speak about your situation and what is the appropriate remedy in your case. You can go to the federal court, you can do reconsiderations, you can there's avenues that you can take, but it's very important for the procedural fairness letter or a rejected application for inadmissibility or misrepresentation to reach out. You can't just ignore it and think that it can go to another country, but So we'll just leave it at there. We've talked a lot about this question, but inadmissibility and misreps are really important and very, very serious. Thank you, Fernando. And Karina says, thank you, Fernando, as well. Speaking of Fernando, he does have a super, so let's get right to it. He says, sorry, your co-host title is cutting off there. There we go. He says, I will be entering on December with a SOWP. I have a job offer and they want me to start before December. Can this be legally done remotely? How?
This is a good question, Fernando, and just a little shout out to Fernando because I am happy to have interacted with him before. But this all comes down to what the definition of work is. And so, spousal open work permits, that's great. It's an open work permit, so you can work for any employer in any province. And once you have that document approved and actually issued to you in Canada, then for sure you have authorization to work. But the trick is, well, what happens if you're working remotely before that? And so, you can go and look at immigration has some definitions of what constitutes work. But the general rule is that you are not allowed to work in Canada, enter the Canadian labor market, unless and until you have specific authorization to do that inside of Canada. So the definition of work is extremely broad under Regulation 2, and it says anything for which wages are earned or commission is paid or that enters the Canadian labor market. So something that you would normally have a Canadian employee doing. So it's very, very important that nobody who's a foreign national, so before you actually get that open spousal work permit issued, here we go. Cedric's gone and he's researched it and he's found the definition of work. So there you go. Work means an activity for which wages are paid, commission is earned, or that's in direct competition with the activities of Canadian citizens or permanent residents in the Canadian labor market. So that is a very broad definition and it can cover many circumstances. So I have always told people that if you have an employer that is not a Canadian employer, that is paying you in non-Canadian funds, that is paying you to do work that is not for Canadian clients, then of course this is case specific, but you're probably fine, right? If there's no connection to the Canadian labor market. And it gets more and more complicated and more risky in terms of maybe you have tipped over into the definition of entering the Canadian labor market if now maybe you have a Canadian employer and maybe they're paying you in Canadian funds. So be very, very careful. You definitely do not ever want to be working without authorization because that's a ground of inadmissibility. It's a breach of the act and it can jeopardize your entire application. So make sure that if you are working remotely, it's purely remote. It's for a non-Canadian employer. It's getting paid in non-Canadian funds to a non-Canadian account, and you are not doing work for Canadian clients generally. There are some interpretive guidelines on that. And maybe when Cedric's fielding the next question, I can go and try to find where those interpretive guidelines are, and then we can post them. So
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually we talk a lot about inadmissibility without really without talking about the you know concretely the law and so on. Um, so here we go. Let's just pull it up here. So what you're referring to. So here is a misrepresentation, and sorry, this is kind of a sidebar, but we can see the definition here of misrepresentation is very large, right? So directly or indirectly misrepresenting or withholding material facts. So very large definition of misrepresentation. But what we want is the non-compliance. So let's go find it. Or non-compliance. So there we go. So this is under the inadmissibility section. And it says here a person is inadmissible for failing to comply with this act in the case of a foreign national through an act or omission which contravenes directly or indirectly a provision of this act, right? So in this case, if you are working without authorization, you are contravening directly a provision of this act, you are inadmissible, right? So we definitely want to avoid this.
yeah. And Cedric, I just shared the the URL for the program operation manual from immigration. And
Excellent.
this is called Temporary Foreign Worker and International Mobility Programs. What is work? And so keep in mind that there are two broad umbrella categories. So the temporary foreign worker program usually are the types of jobs that require a labor market impact assessment. The international mobility programs are everything else. So free trade agreements, open spousal work permits, IEC, Mobilité francophone, all those things fall within the international mobility programs. But for both of those categories, the same definition of what is work applies. And so this is where they've given us the regulation in Regulation 2, the definition of work, and they give some interpretive guidelines. So keep in mind that this is just immigration's interpretation. This is not law. This is their policy interpretation, but it is helpful in terms of this is what officers look at. And so this is a helpful resource for clients and the public to use to say, okay, well, is what I'm doing likely to be considered work by an immigration officer? So you can scroll down here and you can see they've got some definitions for wages, what competes directly, and then they have some examples of things that do constitute work. So coming in, doing hands-on work, even if you're trying to, a lot of people say to me, Alicia, can I just volunteer for this company? And in general, no, you cannot volunteer for a company because that's that last bullet point. Unpaid employment undertaken for the purpose of obtaining work experience, such as internships or practicums that are normally done, that still is work in Canada, according to immigration's policy interpretation. So be very, very careful. If you scroll down, what kinds of activities are not considered to be work? And this is where you can see that it's jobs that are not entering the Canadian labor market. So things where you're purely doing volunteer work that would normally never be remunerated or that would lead to a paid job, helping a friend or family member during a visit, long distance. And so this is key where you're not at all entering having a Canadian client, um, long distance by telephone or internet, work done by a temporary resident, as long as the employer is outside Canada. So if the employer is inside Canada, then that becomes a problem. So this is that example where I said, outside of Canada, paid by a non-Canadian employer to a non-Canadian account, no Canadian clients.
Yeah, and I think that's the challenge of answering these questions, that there's so many ifs and buts, and right in this question, Fernando, we don't know if you're in Canada, if you're not in Canada, when you're going to be remotely working. Um, but yeah, there we have it from Alicia on what is work. It seems like if he was in Canada, he can't do this. Right,
No, no, and Fernando, I believe, is not inside Canada yet, is coming to Canada as of
right.
December with that open spousal work permit.
Oh,
Yeah,
right. There we go. The very first line.
yeah.
There we go. I missed it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alicia. All right, Fernando, let's take a look at this next question. Let's take a look. Sorry, I should maybe line these up a little bit better. Um, Sajat says, "Hello, any idea about the post-grad work permit extensions are going to be announced?" Well, yeah.
Oh,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead, Cedric.
Listen, it's said during the summer, right? So we're already a month down. There's 2 months left for summer, right? So it's unfortunate that we don't have more details at this time. I know a lot of people are waiting right now for news on the program, right? There's a lot of unknowns. We talked about this a little bit yesterday and on Tuesday. In general, are they going to allow other individuals? And Alicia, we've also talked about this. Are they going to allow other individuals to take another public policy extension, right? Are you going to be allowed to switch from visitor status to work status inside Canada? There's a public policy right now, and you should be allowed to, right? Are they going to allow individuals, for example, who may have worked without authorization, they didn't realize that their postgrad work permit was expiring, right? Or situations of study to work, might be some unauthorized work. So very interesting question. We're actively monitoring this. I can assure you that as soon as this is announced, Mark is going to come on live, regardless where he is. He's going to find an internet connection. He's going to come on and he's going to give you guys an update. This is maybe a good segue to talk about what we have going on in terms of other resources. So we do these live Q&As, but we also have the Canadian Immigration Institute. And this is for, we try to target people who want to do their own immigration applications, but they want to do it correctly, right? They want to get the help and the advice to do this properly. So you can explore our courses. We have our Express Entry course, which we've talked a lot about on our live Q&As. You can see everything that we cover. It's coming up actually next week, and you can see at the very bottom all the different modules of what we cover, what we talk about. It's 642 minutes of videos, and you get 4 hours live with Mark. It's a fantastic resource, and we do have at the bottom, you can actually register as well at the bottom here for the post-grad work permit extension. So as soon as it's announced, they are going, Mark's going to go live, and he's going to help you in a course to apply for the post-grad work permit. So unfortunately, we don't know much, but I can guarantee you that as soon as we do, we're going to be updating you on on this.
Yeah, and it, we feel for you guys because this was announced. I mean, there were kind of stirrings about this program being announced, and then it was officially indicated by the Minister of Immigration that details would be coming in the coming weeks. But there have been many weeks since that was indicated to the public, and people are expiring. Their status is expiring, the post-grad work permits are expiring, and it's going to become financially very difficult for individuals to remain in Canada without being able to work the longer this goes on. And so we definitely do feel for you. We understand that this is causing a hardship to a lot of people who are stuck in a position where now they don't want to leave Canada. Maybe they have an express entry application in the pool or a TR to PR application or some sort of employer sponsored LMIA work permit. Their postgrads expired and nothing's coming through yet. They're hanging their hats on this public policy, and for whatever reason, there's no program details yet. And probably because they're looking at doing a new platform for people to be able to apply through the new public policy. Um, so we are hoping that immigration's going to get that sorted out and announced as soon as possible.
Yeah, and this leads me actually. We have ATIP requests. I did put an ATIP, so we have access to information requests where you can request information from the government. And this includes IRCC. They are subject to the law. And we talk about ATIP requests a lot for clients in the sense that we are going to request their visa file notes, but you can also request other information than the visa officer's notes. So here we're talking about, presentations, emails, completed presentations, and whatnot. So I do have a pending request talking about changes to occupations, and there's another pending one specifically asking for the post-grad work permit. So by law, they have 30 days to get back to us, but they're very, very busy. There's a big, big, big backlog, but I can also guarantee that as soon as we have more information, more precise dates, we're going to publish the access to the information requests and try to provide you with updates. And I don't see any questions right now, but it's a very popular question. What do we do in cases where someone's status is going to expire? Like, let's say someone August 15th, no more postgraduate work permit. What would you do, Alicia?
So the question is, your status is going to expire?
Yeah, so I don't sorry, there's no question on the screen. You might be looking for one. I was just asking you hypothetically if my status expires in 2 weeks, I'm in Canada and I want to stay in Canada. What would you do?
Yeah. So, of course. Oh, sorry, can you hear me, Cedric, or is it still muted?
No, no, you're on. I hear you loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. I had a mute thing coming up on there. So, yeah, you always need to maintain your legal status, and it's an obligation under the Act that you have to maintain whatever status it is that you're entitled to or eligible for. And sometimes that's just visitor status. Sometimes you're eligible to apply for a work permit or a study permit. But most of the time, if you don't have an underlying authority for that work permit, if there's no public policy that's been announced yet and there's no category that fits for you, then it might be just a renewal of your visitor status prior to its expiry. And so this is, if you have to extend your visitor status, then making sure that you do so prior to the end date on your current visitor visa or your visitor record. Or if you didn't have a passport that was stamped, then you have to very carefully check what was your entry date. And so sometimes now people are coming through the airports and all they have are those little kiosks, and maybe you don't even have a stamp in your passport. So you've got to go back and check your boarding records and flight information and then carefully diarize. All right, the general rule is if you've come into Canada, you've got 6 months as a visitor, and you have to apply to extend your status prior to the end date of 6 months from the date that you entered. So immigration does say on their website, and I do get a lot of questions about this. Well, it says on the website you have to apply 30 days before. What if I miss that 30-day before deadline? Again, this is not law. This is immigration's advice because they see people panicking, they see last minute applications. The online immigration system works on UTC time, and people sometimes miss the deadline. So they just recommend 30 days before. But keep in mind, the legislation is that you can apply to extend your status or change your status up until the day that your status expires. So count forward 6 months from the date that you entered. And that's when you have to make sure to have submitted your application for a change of conditions.
And if I have a pending visitor record and then the post-grad work permit gets announced, I'd be able to
Sorry,
switch back.
say that again, Cedric.
If my post-grad work permit expires and I made the visitor record application and now I'm eligible for an extension, I'd be able to. We're really hoping. We don't know all the information right now, but we're really hoping that you're then going to be able to switch back to a work permit, to post-grad work permit.
Yeah, and this comes from the legislation as well, because normally what happens is if you only have visitor status within Canada, then you're not usually able to apply directly for a work permit. Normally, you have to apply outside Canada as an online application, exit, and then come back into the country to be able to be issued that work permit. That's the normal rule. But because of the pandemic, immigration officials realized there were a whole bunch of people who were stranded inside of Canada, and it was not practical to have people leave the country and then come back in with the travel restrictions and COVID testing and the rules with respect to international travel. So they did issue a public policy to allow a change in that. Um, and I cannot understand a policy rationale for them giving a new public policy extension on this 18 months when it's been so long since people's status is probably expiring, right? If that public policy extension is now going to be valid for 2022, then hopefully they are also going to extend that public policy to say that they can do that even if they are in visitor status from within Canada. But that remains to be seen. So that's something that we're waiting to hear about. The other thing that is still a question that's open is whether or not that post-grad public policy. So if you had a postgrad and then you already did a public policy open work permit in 2021, would you be eligible for another open 18-month public policy 2022 application? So that's something that's still a question to be answered also.
Yeah, a lot of unknowns, and I really feel for everyone who's been caught up in the COVID and the delays and whatnot. But at the same time, the public policies have been advantageous for a lot of clients to, as you mentioned, not leave Canada and so on. So we can only hope for the best. Fingers crossed. Hopefully it all works out. We do have 3 paid comments, which I have not seen. That's this many, and we have 25 minutes left, so let's get right to it. We have Gooner Boy, which I've seen on this podcast on Mark's channel as well. Gooner Boy, nice to see you again, and he asks the following question. He says, "Hey Cedric and Alicia, the target for IRCC is around 55K this year. Does that include provincial nominees or simply foreign skilled workers and Canadian experience class? My CRS score is under CEC. So, my CRS score under CEC is 507. I'm hoping for a bigger draw. So Gunnar Boy, I think as we talked about a bit on this podcast, we think it's going to be at 500 for the next 6 months or so. So make sure obviously that your language tests are valid. You know, if you lived anywhere else for 6 months, you have another police report. Obviously your passport is valid. You have the proper knock code. You have the reference letter and whatnot. Because you could again, we're just giving legal information here. You could possibly get an invitation to apply in the next 6 months. We are hoping for bigger draws. Now, in regards to the 55K this year, my understanding, Alicia, is that this is a federal target when it comes to permanent residency. Can you tell us more about that?
So, yeah, immigration does set out the immigration levels plan every year. And so, as part of that immigration levels plan, there's a breakdown in terms of the economic categories and how many applications they have targeted to process within each subcategory. And so, those immigration levels plans are always very interesting reading. Um, it does give you a breakdown by section, and I don't know, Cedric, if we're able to go find that immigration
Let's
levels
go
plan
find it.
here and pull it up in the background. But that's what we're talking about here. So we
Let's take
can
a look.
see if we can race and try to find that current one.
Here we go. Let me just zoom out here. Oh my goodness,
Oh,
all these
perfect. You've got it.
numbers. So here's the 55K.
Okay. And so, yeah,
Here, I'll send you
it's
the
so
link,
small.
Alicia. I'll
Okay.
send you the
It's
link.
so small on
But
my
yes,
screen, I can
we have
barely read it.
55K. We have this under target, and we have this it intersects with federal skilled workers, and we have the answer to our question right here, right? Um,
Yeah.
includes federal skilled workers program, federal skilled trade program, and Canadian experience class. So there's a separate one for the PNPs, and we can actually see them here at the very bottom. So the PNPs are expected to take 83,500, and immigration as they continue to ramp up processing, but also because of COVID, a lot of the immigration programs they just stopped. They just stopped, and I was reading what 2.4 million immigration applications in backlog. There's quite a bit of backlog, but they're ramping up processing and they're actually looking to take more permanent resident applicants in 2023. So we're talking about 75,000, and then in 2024 we're looking at 110,000. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of people, Alicia.
Yeah. And, you know, based on demographics, this is important for Canada's future, right? We have a population where we don't have that replacement rate. And so if we want to continue to grow and thrive, then we're going to need skilled people coming to be contributors to Canada. And so if you look at these immigration levels plan, you can see that they have broken it down by the low range and then the high range. And so they do give a little bit of wiggle room within each of those categories. So it's not fixed in stone, but it is what immigration as a department is targeting. So, keep in mind that you can look at the number of applications processed to date to see where we are. And that's why a lot of people were speculating that by July, the minister had to open up express entry again in order to be able to continue to meet the targets going forward for the end of this year and next year.
There we have it. How exciting! What a time to be practicing immigration law and helping all you guys with your immigration applications. All right, we do have some more super chats, so let's get right to it. Oh my goodness, we have another super chat. Keep piling up. There's so many questions, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really happy to do our best to try to answer all your questions. Let's take a look at Hadir's Baja has a question. He says, my general manager left the company I'm working at. I got a promotion after completing my 1 year experience in Knock B. Now, both my manager and my general manager are gone. Can the new GM write me an employment letter? What do you
Yeah,
think?
and This is a good question. This happens often because, of course, personnel change at companies and people move on, especially if you have worked there, a number of years in the past. And so when you look at the requirements under Express Entry, and one thing I will mention too, Cedric, and maybe you can show people where this is on our website, but we do have a tool, right? Mark has worked for years and years under Express Entry, and there is a document checklist that we have as a tool. People can go and they can enter their email address, and we can send this document checklist to you, because it's really, really important to make sure that you're getting all the right documents. And it's essential that you're getting the proper reference letters and employment documentation. So if you go here and you enter in your email address, then we can send you our Express Entry profile documents checklist. But it is very important that you follow all the requirements for what immigration is requesting in order to prove your NOT category and your experience. So if you are looking at a situation where your general manager has left, because one of the requirements is that you have that letter signed by your direct supervisor or HR manager. And if that person has left, then you will want to have the current direct supervisor or HR manager. But if that person, if immigration, if an officer were to call them up and ask them, well, what do you do on a daily basis? And they actually don't know because they haven't worked with you, or, they were not the person that was there while you were there, then it probably is important for you to also get another letter from, if you can, the person who was your general manager at the time. And you can ask them for a personal letter that's not on corporate letterhead if they've moved on and they're just in their personal capacity. Or maybe if they're in a different company and they say that their new role is X. But you would be in a situation then when you'd have two letters. You'd have one letter that complies with all the current requirements from the current employer, and you'd have backup letters from the people that you worked with specifically, so that you can give immigration somebody's name and more detailed background and breakdown of what you did with them on a daily basis. So get what you can to make sure that you are proving your experience properly for the job that you did and the NOC code that you have chosen.
That's exactly it. And I've had a lot of questions also from both clients, also in the chat. I can see some about what to do if you can't get an employment letter. And I think the idea is to make it as easy as possible for the immigration officer to agree with you that you have this NOC code, right? So if you can't get the reference letter, this is not your case. But if you couldn't get one, you were talking about trying to have, for example, a contract with the main duties, and you providing your own letter of explanation of the efforts, right, to obtain the letter of reference. Tried contacting the company, but it was closed. Couldn't reach the general manager. Tried to do X, Y, Z. Looked all over town. I looked online, and then you can actually explain uh, how you met these main duties and the lead statement and whatnot. So you got to get creative. Sometimes it could be letters from former employees, from your colleagues, could be pay stubs, could be emails, but there's other ways that you can work on that. And that's something that we do with our clients, Alicia, is when we're preparing for Express Entry, from the moment that you create the profile is to make sure that we have all the documents ready. So when you have the invitation to apply and you're ready to apply, there are no issues with proof for the points that you want to claim. So for those of you just joining us, we are immigration lawyers at Holf Immigration Law, and you're able to go on our website here at the very top and click Speak to a Lawyer, and at the very bottom here you can see all the lawyers at our firm. And here's Alicia's profile, and she specializes in express entry and PNPs, corporate immigration, and work permits. So as you were saying earlier, was it 18 years of experience in immigration law?
I think I'm
Almost
coming up on 18.
on
Yep.
18? Well, there you go. You practiced immigration law since before Express Entry. You were there,
It's
you
true.
were doing PR before it was created. We have our colleague Chanel, also an immigration lawyer. She's based in Toronto and a lot of experience as well with helping people immigrate to Canada, especially for study permits. We're seeing really good results with preparing strong applications with Chanel for study permits. And then here at the bottom, here I am. I'm developing a lot of a lot of refusals. You have delayed application, unreasonable delays, you've been refused, and misrepresentation. Obviously, I do a lot of express entry as well, and study permits and work permits, but really, my practice is focusing on overcoming rejections and whatnot. So you can find me at the bottom here, and I do telework from outside Canada. I am on the Eastern European summer time zone. So right now for me, it's 8:10 p.m., which means if you're in Canada, I'm available in the mornings, and if you are abroad, I'm available most likely on your time zone. So there we have it.
Et aussi à noter, Cedric, il parle
Oh, yeah.
français.
Oui, bien sûr. Donc, si vous avez des questions en français, si vous voulez me parler en français, si vous vous exprimez en français, euh, j'offre des services juridiques en français aussi. Donc, ce serait mon plaisir de vous rencontrer et de discuter de votre situation, soit en français, soit en anglais, ou un petit peu des deux.
So there you
There.
go. We've got Cedric who speaks fluently in French if you need services in French also.
Thank you, Alicia. I did forget to mention that. Guys, there's so many comments. This is my third day in a row streaming, and I've never seen more comments. This is fantastic. I mean, we definitely
And
can't
we
get all. Yeah,
Yeah, we try to answer as many as we can. We try to answer as many that we think have general applicability, so that we're hopefully helping as many people as possible with these live streams. And for sure, if you have specific immigration legal advice that's required, make sure to book a consult. We have tons of availability. We will also come back next week and we'll be doing more live streams. But, and I know, Cedric, it's starting to get late, so if you want to take a few more questions, we'll make sure to get those in before we wrap it up for today.
absolutely. And we try to take paid questions and also unpaid questions and whatnot, but we do also prioritize the paid questions. And I don't think I've ever had a live with 5 paid questions. So we've taken some unpaid questions, and I'd love to take more unpaid questions, but we also need to prioritize some who have paid. So let's have another one up here. Abhijit Kumar says, my BOW work permit application was refused in March 2022. I applied for restoration of my open work permit. Have been waiting since then. I'm currently out of status. Anything else at this point to get back to working sooner?
Sorry, Cedric, can you read the first line again? What kind
Yeah.
of application?
Uh, BO work permit.
A DO?
BO work permit.
Oh, a bridging open work permit. Okay. So bridging open work permit was applied for in March of 2022.
Sorry, sorry. I know it's also small on my end. Um,
Okay,
let me here. Just send it over to you on Teams.
there we go. Okay,
Um,
so bridging
and it-
open work permit application refused March 2022, applied for restoration of open work permit, waiting since then. Okay, so this is one where I definitely recommend to do a book a consultation because this is not a good situation. Um, so keep in mind, in general, bridging open work permits are only available to people in very specific situations. So normally you have to have applied for some sort of permanent residence application and have received acknowledgement of receipt. So TR to PR with an acknowledgement of receipt or express entry. However, it's not just an express entry application in the pool. A lot of people get this wrong. So you can go to the tool, you can look at, are you eligible for a bridging open work permit? And you have to have actually received an invitation to apply plus have filed your EAPR and have that acknowledgement of receipt that you filed your EAPR in order to be able to apply for a bridging open work permit under express entry in general. Um, if for some reason that application was refused in March 2022, that's bad news. Depending on why it was refused, you might have that restoration application and maybe you were able to get that in within the first 90 days and you were in that eligibility period for restoration. But if you are currently out of status, then immigration could take enforcement action against you. So they could move to remove you, which is never something that you want. And hopefully there are some other options or avenues for you to move forward, but you don't want to be in continued non-status inside of Canada. So please reach out, book a consultation so we can understand specifically what's happened. But the general point for most listeners is to make sure to go to the IRCC website to look at what kind of application you could be eligible for if you're looking at bridging open work permit applications, and always be very careful about those restoration applications because you don't have implied status to continue to work, right? As soon as you are outside of status, then you have to stop working. Otherwise, you're working without authorization, which is another form of inadmissibility.
Yeah, it's exactly it. And just you will also be asking yourself, what are the consequences if I work without a work permit? And so we did talk about admissibility, which at its very core is very bad. If you're inadmissible for a lot of immigration programs, right? We're not like work permits,
Yeah.
express entry, you name it. You're most likely going to be inadmissible. So it applies to all the immigration programs. But if we take a look more closely here at the immigration and refugee protection regulations, so here we're under the issuance of work permits, and more specifically under Regulation 200. And we go down, we're going to look here, and we can see that an officer shall not issue a work permit to a foreign national if the foreign national has engaged in unauthorized study or work in Canada or failed to comply with a condition. So for 6 months has elapsed since the cessation of the unauthorized work or study or failure to comply, or here we're also talking about failure to comply with a condition. So if you're overstaying right now in Canada and you're not working, you're still failing to comply with leaving Canada at the end of your stay. So there's a 6 month cooling off period, and there are other avenues. You can be issued a temporary resident permit. There are some exceptions to them, but in general, you have to resolve your non-compliance, and you're going to resolve your non-compliance by voluntarily leaving Canada.
Yeah, so this becomes a very complex and case-specific analysis. But yes, Cedric, for sure, it's really important that you point out that there are consequences for sure unauthorized work or study, where an immigration officer is not even allowed to give a new work permit if it hasn't been 6 months since the end of the unauthorized work, or a new study permit if it hasn't been 6 months since the end of the unauthorized study. So there's a mirror provision for study permits, just like there are for work permits. So be really careful if you are outside of status. Please make sure to speak to an immigration lawyer right away.
There we go. Menely says, I have a valid postgrad work permit issued back in 2001, 2021, but was given a visitor visa instead of a work visa. Okay, interesting. I have not applied. I've not exited Canada since June 21. Will it be an issue? Listen, I had not even read this question, Alicia, before we started talking about being in Canada without a status. Um, so, right, so you have,
Uh-oh.
listen, Manali, we just talked about inadmissibility. We just talked about working or studying without authorization. It is quite serious. Um, I don't know what more can be said than resolve your non-compliance, book a consult with us to explore your avenues. Maybe you had a maintain, maybe you made an application at a maintain status. Maybe you can request to stay in Canada through humanitarian and compassionate needs. You have a really good reason to stay in Canada, like a child, someone sick. But in most cases, it literally involves taking a plane, go back to your home country, and then reapplying later. I mean,
So yeah, and this is very unusual, right? If you had a valid postgrad work permit, but were somehow given a visitor visa instead of a work visa, that's very odd. It ought not to have happened. And so immigration deems that people know the law, even if they don't. And so immigration deems that people know that they have to have a work permit in order to work. And it's even worse for employers. So employers are deemed to know the law. And so there's an extra provision that says Canadian employers cannot employ anybody without proper work authorization. So this is a problem not only for applicants, but also for their employers. And so it's very, very important that as soon as you realize you have a visitor visa and not a work permit, that you fix that and you go to amend the document if it was issued in error, or reapply to make sure that that work permit is properly issued. So make sure to address this yesterday to try to, or last year, I guess, to make sure that this is resolved as soon as possible, because it is a big problem.
Yeah, absolutely, Alicia. So there we go. We're almost at our 1 hour mark, and we do have three 1 hour live Q&As on our channel. And let's just take another, what do you say, question and two questions. Take a final question, and we'll go from there. We're gonna pick a question. Let's take a look here. I'm trying to find one that we haven't answered already. I see another one on teleworking. Um, History questions, um, results. Well, here we go. Otana has a very broad question, but I think a lot of people, if you're just joining us, welcome. Has a very open-ended question. They say, "What is the best way to immigrate to Canada?" The best way to immigrate to Canada is by becoming an international student here in Canada. Period. Otana, there's a lot of options actually, depending on an individual's situation, right? So in some cases, coming to Canada to study is an option, but it can also be quite expensive to pay tuition fees as a foreigner inside Canada, especially when you're doing a 3 or 4 year degree, right? And so the advantage of of dealing with an immigration lawyer is that we actually help you determine, when you book a consultation, we help you determine what is your best way forward in terms of coming to Canada, right? Is it going to be through an express entry, permanent residency? Is it going to become through a work permit through your employer? In some cases, if you're in the United States or Europe, you might not need a labor market impact assessment to come to Canada to work, right? Can you get that experience in Canada and then qualify for permanent residency, right? So there's various ways, and this is what we do in the consultations: is we speak with you and we determine the best course of action.
Yeah. And in general, if people are looking for resources, we do have a number of blogs that are on our website where we are discussing kind of the broad categories. So, you know, what are the entry requirements to Canada? Who's coming as a visitor, as a worker, as a student? Looking at different types of pathways for permanent residency, looking at, in general, you've got a few things, right? You've got the sponsorships and the family class, and for those, you have to be in a legitimate, genuine marriage to a Canadian citizen or permanent resident. And then there's also applications that are economic based, and that's where most people are coming through. So they're looking at the economic applications for provincial nominations. They're looking at moving to express entry because they've gained enough Canadian work experience, and maybe they came as a student before that in order to be able to gain enough points under CRS for that Canadian education, and then hopefully that year of Canadian high skilled work experience. So there are a number of moving parts, but there are very specific things that sometimes help people depending on your nationality and your work experience and your background.
So there we have it, guys. Thank you so much for joining us on today's live Q&A. The next Q&A is going to be Tuesday at 4 a.m. Toronto time, and it's going to be just by myself, where I'm specifically targeting individuals who are abroad, who are outside Canada, and want to join us for live Q&A. So that's 4 a.m. Toronto time, 9 a.m. London, UK time. So a little bit more flexibility for those who are not in Canada. And then Mark is going to be coming back on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, so 11 a.m. Calgary time, and then Alicia and Mark do a live Q&A on Thursdays at 11 a.m. Calgary time as well. So there we have it. Any final words, Alicia, before we head out?
I just wanted to really thank you,
Oh
Cedric, for
yeah.
figuring this all out on your platforms and making sure that you can the show can go on, as it were. So thank you so much. Thank you to everybody for your questions and for coming back and helping with us with audio and letting us know when you can hear us.
All right. Catch you guys next time. Bye.
Take care.